Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I am Erin Waters. I am a member of the Board of Directors at Basic Rights Oregon, and I'll be our moderator / host today. I hope I'm entertaining. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm just angry. Y'all gonna have to deal with that. So today we've got a number of folks from the community who are doing a lot of great work. And we're going to be talking a little bit about how they are shaping some of our community and the landscape for tomorrow. We're going to be talking about the trans and LGBTQIA2S+ community, particularly the Black community, in regard to what's happening these days. So in 1968, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and many others called for a revolution of values. And so in 2020, Black America has collectively called on white America to revolutionize their values and place Black lives where we have known they always should have been, which is centered in the fight for equity and justice. We're here today not only because of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Aaliyah Johnson and Tamir Rice, but we are here because after 400 years of systemic oppression against Black and Indigenous peoples, we need to speak and we need to be organized. That struggle begins with our people being brought here as slaves and murdered by genocide, living through lynching and Jim Crow. We're still finding grown Black men hanging from trees in public places today. And of course, that prison industrial complex, which was never built with us in mind. It was always built to control. So today, with America on fire, we're asking if white folks will listen and help dismantle many of these systems that are literally keeping the knee on our neck. So what I'd like to do is give everyone a chance to kind of introduce themselves. You can talk for just a minute or two about who you are and what brings you here today. So let's go ahead and start with Ms. Alexxis.
Hi, I'm Alexxis Robinson Woods. I use she and they pronouns. I am currently serving as the Program and Services Director for Bradley Engel, serving domestic violence survivors. Right now, I also have one of the few LGBTQ programs and trying to figure out how to make those people feel safe with what's going on right now, particularly the trans women of color that are currently working with our organization.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Salomé?
Hi, I'm Salomé Chimuku. I am the co-founder of the Portland Black Resilience Fund. I'm currently unemployed because that's a volunteer position, but I have worked in Oregon for the last 10 years in public sector, everything from the legislature all the way down to local political efforts. And I am first generation, so my family immigrated here from Angola in the 90s, and I was born and raised in Portland.
Great, thank you. Welcome. All right, Travis?
Hi, I'm Travis Nelson. I'm a board-certified registered nurse. I'm also an officer of the Democratic Party of Oregon and a member of the Democratic National Committee, where I serve as Western Director of the DNC Black Caucus. I've been a nurse for nearly 15 years. I've got a background in ER nursing, critical care nursing, case management, inpatient rehab, but currently I do union work for the Washington Nurses Association and serve in a volunteer capacity for the Oregon Nurses Association on the PAC board and the Cabinet on Health Policy.
Fantastic. Welcome. Cameron?
Great. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you, everyone watching this live stream town hall. My name is Cameron Whitten. I am a community activist, a small business owner, a nonprofit executive. I've spent as someone who has survived youth homelessness here in Portland, I've spent the last 5 years giving back to the same community that was here for me when I've needed it the most. I recently served as the executive director of the Q Center, Portland's LGBTQ+ community center, and I currently am the founder and executive director of Brown Hope, racial justice nonprofit, and a co-founder with Salomé of the Black Resilience Fund.
Excellent, excellent. And of course, last but never least in our community, Lamar.
Yes. Hey everyone, my name is Lamar Wise. I use him, his pronouns. I do a lot. I guess right now the biggest thing that I'm focused on is racial justice and the continued protests that we've been having and being on the streets and helping to organize and do some of the policy work as well there. My day job, I work for AFSCME, which is the third largest labor union in the state. And I'm also one of the co-founders for Washington County Ignite, which is a PAC in Washington County to help elect Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as young people and folks in the queer and trans community. So I'm happy to be on, and thanks for making space for all of us.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for letting us know a little bit about who you are. I am a really strong facilitator in the sense that we have like an hour, and that's not going to be enough time to talk about everything we are going to want to talk about. I know us, we could do this all day, but we don't have all day. So first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to just go ahead and open this up a little bit. So let's talk about policing, because that's why we're here. That's one of the things that's bringing us together. I see Alexxis sighing. We know how that goes. So let's talk a little bit about, since we are talking about defunding police, which is something that seems to confuse and upset people when they're not paying attention. Let's talk about what that means. I'd like to start with Alexxis, because I know you have spoken to PD on many occasions and have some of that background.
Yeah. The thing about it is one, this needed to happen years ago, and the problem is we're so deep into this system that we're going to have to see some serious bumps before we see it fixed. Because once you start peeling away these pieces, you're going to find out what's more wrong and what's there. Having a background and worked in law enforcement with 5 years in police work, 15 in court, it's going to be a struggle and absolutely necessary. I'm happy to see what's happening. I'm surprised to see it, but I'm happy to see calls for defunding. I'm happy to calls to see money moved. And what I like is the ones that are actually saying, let's take this money and let's move it here. They have a plan on what to do with it. They have a plan to put it back into society and help the system as a whole, as opposed to, because I like the concept, but we need to make sure that we do this right, because if we eliminate it, we overload another system that's not prepared to take people of color. So we remove police work so we don't have as many going to jail. We don't have as many losing their job. But where do we find them housing? Where do we get jobs? Where do we continue these pieces? This is a great piece, but we have to make sure that this money we're taking, we're putting it into job resources. We're putting it into mental health care. We're putting it into housing, and we're putting it back into the neighborhood where these people came from, not simply removing them and shifting them to East County.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have any commentary on that? Maybe Lamar, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I could talk about this for a while. I think at the end of the day, what we need is to start reimagining what safety looks like. And I think we're in a moment where that could happen. But when we say defund, well, there's more to that, right? Like the next stage of that is actually coming together, spending some time, actually, looking at the different policies that exist, both nationally and internationally, looking at our past, like how did folks from indigenous communities, take care of themselves, right? Like this is an opportunity for us to dream a little bit. We should take our time and dream and think about what is actually necessary, what services we currently have that aren't funded that actually contribute to our communities being over-policed. Because it's all intertwined at the end of the day. And so, and I do want to clarify, defunding is a strategy, right? It's a strategy to highlight the other needs that our communities have, in order to keep us truly safe and have us feel safe and actually trust the folks that say that they're supposed to be protecting us. And so that's a little bit of what I've been hearing on the street and with other Black leaders. And I just think we're in a special moment to be able to execute on starting that dream.
Great, thank you. I caught a glimpse of myself a second ago. I know I got that resting, frustrated face. That is who I am. I am Black and awake, so I am frustrated. I will say the defund conversation is complicated because when folks who do not like abortion talk about defunding Planned Parenthood, they understand we're talking about redirecting those funds, but all of a sudden people are confused when we're talking about that with a police system that is taking our lives. So I feel like this is an important part of the conversation. I appreciate that. I'd like to turn it over, since we're talking about moving funds to different organizations, let's talk about the Black Resilience Fund and some of how they have been able to support our community. So Salomé or Cameron, would either of you like to start, and then the other can follow?
All right, thank you, Salomé. So we started the Black Resilience Fund in response to where we are as a country. And to be honest, when I first started seeing the headlines about George Floyd, I braced myself. This is not the first time that we have seen "I Can't Breathe" on camera, a man's life being taken away by the hands of the police, shared across the entire world. This wasn't the first time in weeks that we saw that happen to a Black man. We had Ahmaud Arbery just weeks prior, Breonna Taylor just days prior. The outrage comes, and then nothing happens. And so when I first saw those headlines about George Floyd, I braced myself. I did not expect anybody to actually take action and to finally see value in Black lives. But something's different right now. We now have a window of opportunity. And I think it's very important for white Americans to ask themselves, why is it different now? For our Black communities, our Black leaders, we have always been outspoken. We have always demanded action every time that one of our lives have been on the line. Something's different, and it's not because of Black America. It's different because those who have access to privilege are starting to wake up to the realities of injustice that have always been there. And so as we wake up to this reality, at the Black Resilience Fund, we recognize that there is healing that this country needs to do. We need to heal Black futures, but we also need to acknowledge that for white folks to have gone on so long not knowing, not caring about Black and brown bodies, that has led to a brokenness of the heart and of the soul. And so this country needs healing. Our Black communities need to be able to survive and thrive in our communities, but white folks also need to have a whole healed heart so that they can actually have compassion for real suffering and work with us to end it. And so the Black Resilience Fund was created during a time where many of us have the right to be angry at the world, have the right to be upset and not have hope. But the Black Resilience Fund was created so that we could create an opportunity to actually work towards the future that we want, where everyone is seen, where everyone is humanized, and where we take care of our neighbors. That is exactly the community that we all want to belong to. And so we started this just 2 weeks ago, and we said our Black community is hurting right now, and one way to help them focus on their healing, focus on living their best life, is to provide them immediate relief from financial burdens, whether that's a warm meal, groceries, or an unpaid bill. And it's been amazing to see the thousands of Portlanders who have stepped up in 2 weeks' time. We raised over $500,000 to provide immediate support for Black Portlanders. And that is partly how we can move forward with healing, that we are actually not just saying Black Lives Matter, but actually putting our privilege forward, investing in these communities. So when we say defund, the Black Resilience Fund is actually showing what could happen if we defunded our traditional broken sense of community policing and actually putting it into things that will allow people to be empowered and live their best lives. That's the future that we all want to belong to. And I believe that's the reason why we are able to work so successfully with this community in just a matter of time. You can find out more information on blackresiliencepfund.com, and we're calling on every Portlander, every Oregonian to help us send a message to this region and across the world that we can foster healing and resilience even during some of the most challenging times.
Great, thank you, Cameron. So I'm going to check in with Salomé, and then I'm coming for you, Travis.
Yeah, thank you. I would say to add to that, we've had a lot of questions around how are we giving out this money? How are we assessing needs? How are we prioritizing the most vulnerable? And to me, my response is typically that being Black costs. It costs money, it costs emotionally, it costs spiritually. And to want to reimagine even how we distribute funds, not to just be, oh, here we're going to give you money just for food. It's more of like, here's money for you, and I trust that you know what you need and that you will do whatever you need to do with it to make yourself better. And I think that when we talk about other forms of giving, oftentimes it's used as a way or a means to further oppress or control someone by telling them what they can or cannot do with those funds. And so I think that we are focusing on giving folks the money that they need, so that way they can get their needs met in the way that they would like them. And showing them that even in moments where they are on the receiving end, that they are still in control and still have power over themselves and their situations.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate that. So that goes into some of where and how some of that money should be diverted. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about that. Travis, so can you give us a look into COVID and the Black community, this myth that we couldn't get it, and the reality that we are making up a lot of the not only getting it, but the loss of life, and maybe some of how we can leverage that politically, since that is your sphere.
Yeah, the COVID situation is, as a registered nurse who works with state nurses associations, it's very concerning that we're in the middle of this pandemic that has essentially shut down our society. While the virus is concerning in and of itself, the fact that people of color are being disproportionately affected makes it even more concerning, right? And a lot of why we think this is happening goes back to systemic racism, right? When we look at the history of our country and we go back, hundreds of years, or you don't have to go back hundreds of years, even my parents' generation, where there were experiments being done on folks who look like us, right? And because of that, we have we are less likely, for instance, to go seek treatment when we're having COVID symptoms. And when we do show up in the ER, we're less likely to get that equal health care and equal treatment compared to somebody who is white. So when it comes down to COVID and the Black community, we've got to look at the structures. We've got to look at everything from ER to follow-up care to primary care when it comes to really equalizing healthcare and the impact on Black and brown communities.
Fantastic, thank you. And so I'll ask you to kind of dovetail into, so now that we have this momentum, what kind of political pressure or leverage are we looking at being able to generate now and moving forward? And this is something I'm going to have everybody comment on, so please be ready with an answer.
Yeah, we really need to put pressure on our representatives and our organizations to really take action to ensure that we have equity. That we have equity in healthcare. It's really difficult with this man that we have in the White House, Donald Trump, who, I don't know if you saw his press conference today. He came out and had a press conference that was supposed to be about policing, but he came out and actually talked about how there was a vaccine for HIV. I haven't heard anything about that. Let me know if you've heard something I haven't. But that's the kind of leadership that we have at the top. So expecting a lot out of the federal government at this point is probably not going to be our best route. We've got to focus on our local leaders. We've got to focus on what we're doing here in Oregon, and we've got to put pressure on our representatives and on Kate Brown to make sure that we are that we're getting the data that we need, and to ensure that Black and brown folks have access to health care and are treated the same way that white folks are when we take advantage of the healthcare system. So putting that pressure. And the other thing I will say is be sure to vote this fall. I'm doing a lot of work around elections. I do a lot of work with different candidates. Vote up and down the ballot. A lot of folks get excited about the presidential, but it's really important to make sure that you're voting for everybody from city council and your local races, to your state representatives, to your Congress people, and most definitely for the presidency. We do have a voice. We need to exercise it, and we need to have an overwhelming effort put out this November in order to capitalize on everything that's been happening in this country to ensure that we have long-term sustained change.
Great, thank you. I definitely feel like we have been trying, but as we see in places like Georgia, where I came from, that voter suppression is an art, a science, and a necessary need for those in power. I'm also here for putting that pressure on Ted Wheeler. He probably knows my name by now. We'll see how that goes. Cameron, since you've run for Metro, so let's go ahead and talk to you a little bit about political pressure and how we can leverage that locally.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So we're talking about how we can leverage political pressure and the momentum right now to move forward.
Thank you. So this is important for us to really understand that this is not a moment. We have to build a movement. I've been involved with Black Lives Matter activism since Black Lives Matter first became a term. So sustained action is so necessary. And this moment has opened up a window that will be unique. And we already have seen a lot of bold changes. Colin Kaepernick, who has been basically virtually banned from the NFL for taking a knee. And now we see police officers, whole entire departments taking knees. So we are obviously seeing a paradigm shift happening in this country. We have to sustain our energies and our presence to see how far we can take this. And so really calling on a lot of people who are newer to this cause to really understand the importance of intersectionality and seeing how so many different systems are holding back Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. So it's important to be educated. George Floyd is a great example. You can't just look at it as here was a Black man who was being criminalized by a police officer and life was taken. They saw him as being poor, being a criminal, and likely writing a fake check. So we have to look at the system of poverty, because it wasn't just the policing system that killed George Floyd. It was the system of poverty, which has been a huge weapon of violence against Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities for generations. We are a country that is from stolen land built by stolen people, and the repercussions and the shockwaves of those impacts exist till this day. And so we have to look intersectionally at all the systems that have created barriers to true opportunity for all people and work diligently to undermine those. And so, yes, I am so glad, and I've been there with our local groups like Rose City Justice and the Civil Rights Collective that are asking for immediate change for police reform. We need to continue to push our city councils, our state governments to do more to defund the police. We have to be looking at how do we address huge systems like poverty that we don't see headlines on that. We don't see, in the headlines, the hundreds and thousands of lives that are lost due to systemic poverty. It just isn't, I don't know. Is it not entertaining enough for folks? I don't know, but it doesn't catch attention, and we're seeing so many people die because of it. And so let's continue to take action on police reform, but let's look at these bigger systems that are every day taking lives that we need to be calling our leaders and calling ourselves to task to show up and demand immediate change. That's the work that we're doing with the Black Resilience Fund. We're showing with our actions that people want to see serious change around our wealth gap. Our wealth gap right now in this country is 3-to-1, and it's the same exact amount of wealth gap there was in the 1960s, y'all. In the 1960s. So we sit there and say that we've changed the policies and things are different now. The numbers don't lie. We need to do more than rest on the laurels on the legislation that we passed. We have to actually keep fighting with sustained effort until the outcomes have changed. So that's my main thing, is that, yes, this is a window of opportunity. Celebrate what we've done so far for the paradigm shift, but we have to keep working until the outcomes have changed. That is when we truly have justice.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cameron. So I'm going to get in with everybody else, and so I'm going to add in, if your organization, like Cameron mentioned a couple, if you have candidates that you're connected with, please let us know now. We can make that information available afterward, because folks want to know how we can use voting power to change the situation for the BIPOC community. Brother Malcolm said by any means necessary. Everyone assumes that means violence. That's not the truth. We have so many different options, and we need to make use of every last one of them. There are systems like voting. People have been disenfranchised. We've got land stolen from human beings, and it doesn't matter how they vote. Sometimes they feel like it's never going to move us forward. So let's keep that in mind as we go through these last couple of answers. Alexxis, you want to go ahead? Oh, go ahead.
No, this is Travis. I just wanted to say something really quickly. I've done lobbying for unions and for nurses in the past. And what I will tell you is one of the things as a community we don't do enough is show up after we vote. If you have ever done lobbying, you know that 98% of the folks who are showing up in those legislators' offices and in those city commissioners and those county commissioners are Caucasian people. While it's important for us to vote, and Black folks, we do in general do a great job of voting despite the suppression that we know is real, we do not show up after folks are elected and hold them accountable the way that we need to. So I really want us to remember that after folks are elected, show up at City Hall, show up in Salem, show up in your representatives' offices, and don't be afraid to question them and hold them accountable.
For real, I'm definitely here for that. Disruption and accountability is the name of the game. All right, Alexxis, you want to continue on this one for us?
Yeah, consistency is one of those bigger words, and sustainability, which is what I like what Cameron was using, because that's one of the bigger things that we have one of the bigger holes in. We start that race, we get rolling, we get wound up, and then we slowly roll down when, oh, it's been time, they're better, and then we tend to let our foot off the gas. As a country, as people, as a whole, this happens. And like Cameron was saying, I remember when this happened, first thing I thought of was Rodney King. That was the first thing I thought of, because I remember watching that and seeing that whole thing build up, and for about 2 minutes, we made some change and it went away. 9/11 rolled around. We all got along for about a year. Everybody did. But we didn't keep doing the work. We thought because we had a common enemy, being the key word, that would be fine and we'd be great. No, because then it still came back to work, or as usual in the U.S., when Black and brown people being marginalized. We have to stay on top of it. And like saying, we can't vote them in office. Then, oh, well, they're there. They say they're going to do this, so let's just watch it happen. Well, that's what happens. We watch 4 years of a presidency before we're done. They're out and they didn't do anything. Well, did we as a people ask them to do anything once we put them in office, whether it be mayor, senator, city councilman, county commissioner? Also, the Black Lives Matter has to be more inclusive to Black Trans Lives Matter, because you can't say it, Black Lives Matter, and then have the very next day nothing but video of a Black trans woman being assaulted and people watching. That does not include it, and we do not dilute the narrative. We do not dilute the narrative. This doesn't make a trans person is not white, doesn't change their color, doesn't make them any less who they are. We need to include the narrative for all Black and brown people, because we're all marginalized and we're all at risk right now. I grew up in this state, 47 years. This is my home. And the only thing I see change is gentrification. My grandmother's house is still in the neighborhood where they brought up, and they're one of few because there's white neighbors all the way around them now. And so we have got to stay consistent. We have to keep pushing. And even a year from now, we still need to be mad as hell about this. And we still need to be pushing on this. Because I guarantee you, it's not going to be changed by then. It's not going to be perfect by then. We have to keep our foot on it, and we got to keep going, because this is our chance to make long-term change, and we have to stick with this now. You're muted, Erin.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I want to say we do still have that raffle going, so please send in those questions. You are also entered if you donate. And then I'm going to come back to some more about this trans live situation in just a second, but I'd really like Salomé to wrap us up on this one right here.
Hi, thanks. It's really interesting. I'll preface my response with this. Again, my family immigrated here in the 90s. I'm the only person in my family that was born here in the U.S. and born in Portland. I am the daughter of a child soldier, and my parents and all of my family lived through a civil war. So I'll preface my answer with that. Because, sometimes when people ask me, like, how are you feeling about this? I'm like, well, my norm is, a kind of, unfortunately, an African norm, which is, when we don't like our leaders, we don't vote them out of office, we move them out in body bags. Because that's kind of where the people are there in terms of, we can only take so much, and we're not going to vote you out. It's like, here's this box. So with that in mind, I think for me, when we talk about applying pressure, I like to see people saying yes and. And I think oftentimes we're asked to sacrifice a portion of our identities, a portion of our experiences to gain a win somewhere. And I like to be more like, yes, and this, and this, and this, and then this too, and then some of that. And I think that when we're talking about this position of applying pressure, I think that we also need to keep in mind that some of us do have that political power. Some of us do have some of that leverage. And I think that constantly talking about it from a perspective of what we need to do to appeal to those others makes us fall short of the conversation of some of them are us too. Holding ourselves accountable. And I definitely do love something that Alexxis said, talking about Black trans lives mattering as well. And that doesn't dilute anything because they are also Black. They are part of the Black diaspora. And it's big and it's beautiful, and we need to embrace that, because I know that with working with the Black Resilience Fund, I am finding myself talking to folks who are Black Caribbean, Black Latinos, Black folks from Africa, Black folks who emigrated from Europe. And, that means also sometimes I'm doing my intakes not in English and speaking with people where they're at. And, there's some great organizations out there that do focus on Black immigrant lives in terms of the accelerated rate that we're deported at. A lot of people, when they think about deportation, they think or just stop at the Latinx community. And yes, that is a part of that community. But when it comes to the Black immigrants, we are deported at a really high rate given our number. And I think that when we talk about pressuring and how we can do that in a political pressure way, I've worked for many different political leaders here in Oregon and specifically in the Portland area, as well as working in the legislature. And one thing I've noticed about them is that sometimes they need that extra push and that extra feeling of like, the community will support you if you do this. Because like Travis said, they're day in and day out getting faced with people who tell them no, that the community won't support you. And those folks are actually representing a small minority. But that small minority has the vocal power to make themselves sound like they are the majority. And so I think that continued pressure of getting that in their face of saying, no, I'm not going to accept this portion of the cake. I'm not going to accept the crumbs. I want this and this and this and this and this. And I specifically think about when I was a lobbyist in the legislature, working with, at that time, what is now Unite Oregon, as well as with the Urban League of Portland, how we passed the anti-profiling legislation. I had many folks saying like, okay, why are we adding things beyond race as anti-profiling legislation? And I was like, because more people are being profiled. And, one person told me like, oh, that's too broad. That's too broad. And I'm sorry, but my response is a very flavorful one, which was, yeah, and so is my butt. But I've never heard complaints about that either. So guess what? We're doing this and this community and that community and this community because they are being targeted. And that is what the need is. And so I think that kind of positioning to ourselves of reminding them who has the power, as in the power is the people, and getting in their face about it, about we don't want concessions, we want what we want, because we know what we need.
Fantastic. Thank you. Again, I'm going to repeat, please continue to disrupt, hold people accountable. We need to do that. I'm real concerned about yet another old white man who's about to be in office with a complicated past, and us thinking that just because we put someone who's wearing a blue shirt in there today, that suddenly things will go back to the way they were. They weren't that great back then. So let's not do that. Let's not do that. I want to give a quick shout out to some donors. Thank you to Beth, Reed, Joe, AJ, and Anissa for your gifts. These donations will help keep covering the costs of live captioning our town halls, supporting Basic Rights Oregon. We do have a question about whether or not folks in Southwest Washington are being supported by the Black Resilience Fund. I'm going to answer for y'all. The answer is yes, I'm sure. So we'll make sure that information is available afterward. Something I'd like to do is pivot real quick. So about 2 weeks ago, Isis King, actress on Twitter, said Black trans lives matter to the tune of thousands. Black folks said, well, are you Black? Well, then all lives matter. And so I have a question. How the fuck are you going to all lives matter the hell out of Black trans folks when we're talking about Black trans lives in a particular moment? Like Alexxis said, we have yet another lynch card being passed around of a Black trans woman who was whooped by us. Good couple dozen of us went after her. We have Aaliyah Johnson. We have Raya, who was just lost as well. And Aaliyah was found in pieces in a river. So this is something that our community has to struggle with. And so I'd really like to hear from everybody kind of in a round. We've got about 20 minutes left, so if we can kind of keep responses a little bit moderated there. But I want to hear from everybody about this, because as a Black trans woman, someone who is out, I live my life out. I constantly talk to people. I'm regularly asked to present my pain, my personal experience, my trauma, my story is constantly consumed by well-meaning white people. Well, what does that mean for us within the community? So let's go ahead and start with Alexxis on this one.
Thank you, Erin. It's just, I want to start out by pointing out what happened in the Supreme Court yesterday and the protections that we now have federally for trans and queer and gay and bisexual folks. And the interesting about how that happened literally a day after Trump tried to revoke medical assurances for folks. And so it's just been this real roller coaster of emotions of what's going on in this country. 1 minute you're pissed as hell and at young lady getting assaulted by 12, and then the next day the 12,000 people marching and standing for something. So it's like, okay, we have the capacity. It's clear we have the capacity to be inclusive to all Black and brown folks. In particular, I am tired of defending and not being defended. I go and I walk and I talk, and I am what you see in front of you. I don't hide it, don't change it, and I'm not going to dilute it so I can fit in another spot. I did that. I worked in law enforcement as a Black male, and I sat there and I argued more with the officers I worked with than anybody I dealt with in community ever. I won't do that again, and nor should any trans woman of color have to forget part of who she is to fit in. She can't forget her Blackness to fit in the queer community, and she cannot forget her transness to fit in the Black community. We shouldn't ask that. It's not acceptable, and we are wrong if we do. Okay? If we're going to begin to understand everybody and learn about gender, we need to learn about ourselves as well. We need to look inside, look in the mirror, check yourself in the mirror, see what your belief system is. Because just because there's some bullshit coming your way, excuse my language, that doesn't mean you're not dishing out some yourself that you might think is legit, that you might think is fine because you post that view. White oppressive views have affected all of us. Every time we open a book, every time we turn on the TV, every time we go on, and we don't actually even to the point know just how much it affects us as people of color and how we treat each other and where we're getting that from. We didn't come by this on our own. We were taught that certain subsets of us are wrong, and that's how we need to treat that. We didn't believe that when we were told that, so why should we act on that now? Why should something like that happen where people are just videotaping the assault of another? I don't care if she was trans. I don't care. I think there's no reason as a human. We should have been watching something like that and just videotaping. do something. Step up. Stop it from happening. Because if you're watching it, you're okaying the next time it happens. Because just like we're saying, if you don't say anything at all, you're saying it's okay for it to happen. We have to keep protecting each other. That's what I got.
Thank you, Alexxis. I appreciate you opening up on that. I also can't tell time. We have a little bit more time than I thought. We're going to 1:30, so y'all going to have to continue to hear my and our mouths. All right, so let's go ahead. Cameron, since you worked at the Q Center, you had an opportunity to work with a lot of gender diverse and variant individuals. What are your thoughts here?
Thank you. I'm going to keep my remarks brief because Alexxis has said so much of what needs to be said, and we need to center the voices of Black trans people. What I will say is that it's indefensible. Transphobia and trans violence is indefensible, and we have to hold our communities, and I mean our communities, accountable for that. And what I believe and what I will say to members of our Black community, especially those who really need to work on their transphobia, is that we cannot use the tools of oppression to find our liberation. We have to do better and realize that it's going to be liberating all marginalized and oppressed people that is going to lead us to the liberation that we so yearn for. And so it is indefensible, and I agree that we have to include and center Black trans lives, and let's start doing that right now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cameron. And as a reminder to folks, we did have a clarification come out this past Friday from the federal government that says trans lives are not actually concluded or protected in the civil rights protections of the ACA. That was really devastating for the community. Thankfully, a lot of insurers and businesses have chosen to support the community anyway. The challenge is that I now live in a very liberal, white supportive bubble where we have those state protections, but I came from Georgia. I came from Atlanta. My folks down there are living a different life and a different story, and it's on us to hold these institutions accountable to make sure if we are going to say Black Lives Matter, that we include all Black lives. And then yesterday, like Alexxis was saying, the Supreme Court, in a stunning decision from a conservative justice, said that Black trans, or not just Black, but trans folks and gay folks are included in workplace protections. And so something that I want everyone on the call to remember is that until yesterday, we could be fired for talking about our partners, for talking about our transition, while somebody next to me could be talking about their wife and their kids, and it's no big deal. So our lives are different and from a legal standpoint, and that's something we have to keep in mind. Travis, what are your thoughts?
All right. Sorry about the delay. Yeah, you know, I just want to echo what everybody else has really said. When it comes down to trans lives, as Black folks and as a Black community and as, you know, the Black diaspora, we need to be supportive of everybody who falls under the category of Blackness. What's happening with trans folks is not acceptable. I think that we need to bring attention to the fact that Black trans women are being killed disproportionately to their white counterparts. And as an LGBTQ plus community, we need to make sure that we are being fully inclusive of our trans brothers and sisters, and are really there to have their back and to stand up and really be there to support them in any way that's needed. I serve on the Democratic National Committee. I serve with a woman by the name of Michelle Risher, who is trans, and she's a vice chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon. While she is white, we have been able to work together on some trans issues at the Democratic National Committee. We actually worked together recently to pass a resolution that recognized trans folks and recognized the role that right-wing religion plays in fermenting the fires of anti-transness. So again, I want to echo everything Cameron and I believe Alexxis said previously, and it's an issue that we've got to tackle as a country. It's unacceptable.
I agree. We got to be able to name a problem and talk about a problem before we can fix a problem. All right, Lamar, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. This brings me back to what happened to Toyin Salau.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Yeah, is this better? Okay, cool. Sorry, my mic is like a little bit far away from me. This really brings me back to what happened to Toyin Salau. I guess this past weekend. In terms of us needing to do better to look out for each other, right? I think what Alexxis was saying was completely right. Toyin did a lot to advocate for ensuring that Black femmes and Black trans folks were at the center of the movement, and making sure to continue to highlight the folks that had been slain, and we didn't protect her, like she wasn't protected. And I think this opens up another conversation in terms of sexual assault, and making sure that we that the men in this movement are doing their part to seek trainings and to tear down the toxic masculinity that we have inside of ourselves, right? And so yesterday at the protest, actually, we dedicated the protest to Toyin, and ensuring that we spoke about, continue to speak on the stories that have come out around police brutality concerning women and trans folks. And we also announced that, hey, we're gonna actually also put together a workshop for men to join, to actually start to like learn. And I'm gonna be a part of it as well, and I'm gonna help pay for it. But it's time for us to, like, when we think about reimagining safety, when we think about that, it starts with us. It starts with figuring out how we can actually take care of ourselves, because that's the goal at the end of the day, right? Is community looking out for community. And so as this movement continues, we're gonna start to look at, you know, what that actually looks like on the ground, and what we need to do to solidify some of those practices. And so I'm glad that this is brought up, because it needs to be a part of the constant drumbeat that we have around Black Lives Matter. And we need to continue to move at the pace of the folks in our community that are most vulnerable. And so that's where I'm at, and I think it's time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lamar. When we talk about misogyny and things like that, we don't get to escape those just because we are Black. And when we look at transphobia, we see that there is a huge overlap between homophobia and misogyny, and that results in transphobia and transmisogyny. And so this is something that our community struggle with. Salomé, go ahead, please sound off.
Yeah, I identify as a cisgendered woman, and hearing this question, quite honestly, I don't think I need to speak on it. I would like to actually yield the rest of my time to Alexxis, because I think that it's important to hear from the community about what their needs are, because I don't know those needs, because that is not my lived life.
Appreciate you, sister. Thank you. All right, Alexxis. So, I mean, you and I talk a lot about the trans experience. There's a lot of sly looks and side eyes that we give. So please, sound off. Go ahead. Give us some more.
What I liked was about asking what we need, and that's the key, about with any of us. I mean, because that's how we're changing any of this, is people have to actually ask us what we need. White people have to actually ask people of color what you need in order for to work with us. Cis people, just ask us what we need. Don't ask silly questions. You know what that is. We're human. It's not difficult. It's not nuanced conversation. It's simply human conversation. Anything outside of that, you're not asking a normal person or cis person anyway. You're not having conversations about a trans person's surgeries or identities when you meet them. You're just meeting a human being who's got different stuff going on than you. You don't have to ask about it to acknowledge that exists. Acknowledge them for who they are. Don't act like you don't see it either, because then you're acting like their identity isn't important to you. My trans identity is very important to me, and I wear it proudly. And most of the trans women I know do. And there are some that don't. That means you have to be there for those folks too, who aren't as comfortable living out because they worry about their safety, because they worry about where they go, because they worry about now, because of literally because of the different car I drive, I'm not a target. I'm not seen. These things have not changed a whole lot, presenting in a different form. I'm still target, still seeing the differences now. If I'm waiting at a bus stop, I must be a prostitute. And the number of times going to work in the morning that I have cars stop because I'm standing at a bus stop. So what about me standing at a bus stop at 5:30 in the morning means I'm there for you? So that misogyny part that we're talking about is huge, and it plays a major factor in why trans women of color in particular are assaulted, because all of a sudden we're talking about pride. We're talking about, oh, I'm a man and I am not going to stand for this, and all of a sudden a trans woman is dead in the process because somebody else's pride was more important than that person's life. We cannot have that. We cannot continue to have that, because that's what we're dealing with. And we're not talking about trans women of color who are actually being murdered and killed by people who are white. These are talking about other folks of color who are killing other folks of color. We need to save ourselves if we hope this to happen. If we hope this to continue outside of all of this, Black Lives Matter, we need to protect ourselves as a whole. And we have to be willing to look at each other and say, yes, we need to protect each other. Instead of, okay, well, you're weird or you're out, or some reason that you find you need to marginalize that person even worse. And that's part of white oppression. In order to feel better, you're going to find somebody else to step on. We have got to stop that. We have got to stop finding another person to marginalize to make ourselves better. That's what white oppression has taught us. That's what society is. We need to block that part first.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
To quickly add to that, and make sure to say the name of TT Gully, because TT was a Black trans woman here in Portland who last year was found hanging lifeless from a tree in Rocky Butte Park. And if Black lives really did matter, as we say they should, TT would be alive right now. She would have safe and stable housing. She would be a part of this community. So I wanted to say that because we were talking about Black trans lives in other places of the country, and here in Portland, we have so much work to do.
Thank you for that name, Cameron. I mean, I'll say it again. We are literally still swinging from trees today. This is ridiculous. This is something that I can't even say it should have stopped, because it never has stopped. As a trans woman, I live my whole life out. I am a diversity consultant at a major corporation, so it is my job to be the buzzword manager for white people. That's what I do with my day. And it's really challenging. We constantly have to live out. Like I said, we constantly have to have our stories exposed and consumed. And so it's really challenging as a trans person to live out all the time. While on my way to work, same thing, because I live off 82nd, I'm standing at a bus stop and I have a car slow down and some dude is rolling his window out trying to holler. And I'm like, come on, buddy. Like, we already know this is all kinds of wrong. But when you try and talk about that, I'm a joke. My identity immediately becomes a joke to protect his pride. Chris Rock called me Aunt Tom many, many years ago. And so this is something that our community is continuing to struggle with in terms of shaking off those shackles. So I want to take a little bit of a left turn here. I really want to hear from some folks. So for the folks on the call who don't know, way back in the day, some white folks got mad at some cops. They threw some snowballs. About 6-7 people got killed. The next day, a bunch of white folks hopped on a ship and engaged in looting and destruction to the tune of throwing some tea in the water. So based on the loss of life from state authority, they looted and they destroyed things. We then had an entire war and a whole new nation was founded. 50 years ago, 51, Stonewall. Some folks were struggling. State authority continued to snatch them out of the bar, out of the club, beat and abuse them. People got fed up, started throwing bricks, started throwing bottles. They started destroying things. The white middle-class community, whether it was the forming of this country or back in Stonewall days, came out and said, please go home, get out of the streets. This is not the way to do this. Dr. King has told us that the white moderate is a challenge for us because while they agree with where we want to get to, they do not agree with our methods. And like I said earlier, we live in a very capitalist system that has commodified every single part of our existence. I can't even get into an ambulance because I might go broke. I can't go to an ER because I might go broke. I can't get a traffic ticket because I might end up dead. So when we talk about responses to our discrimination and the methods of that, I'd really like to hear from everybody because I have some strong feelings, as y'all can tell, but I'm the moderator and we're here to talk to y'all. So let's go ahead and start with Travis. You've got some connections to the Democratic National Committee. We talk about voting. What are your thoughts on some of the ways in which we are protesting now? And something that I am expecting is we will have different opinions and different feelings, and it's important that people do not see us as a monolith.
Yeah, I think protesting is extremely important. I do not think we should value property above the lives of humans. That said, I am somebody who's definitely for mostly peaceful protesting. You know, change happens when people get uncomfortable. That's the way it's always worked in this country. You've got to make people uncomfortable if you want to see that true systemic change. And it's called systemic racism for a reason, because it's woved throughout all of our systems. So, you know, whether it's what Dr. Martin Luther King did in leading the civil rights movement in the 1960s. That made white people uncomfortable, and it showed them, many of them, a side of their society that they had not seen. And as a result of that, we had enough white allies to put pressure on white political leaders to actually start to change the laws. I know you mentioned earlier President Obama, and I believe you said something to the effect of we had him in the White House and not a whole lot changed. But what I do want to point out is the fact that if Barack Obama hadn't put the justices he put on the Supreme Court, if there had been a Republican there instead, we would not have marriage equality today. So taking the acts that we take, whether it's protesting, whether it's calling our legislators, whether it's showing up on the city hall steps or on the Capitol steps, all of those actions work to make folks uncomfortable. And when we have the discomfort, that's when we have the opportunity for change in this country.
I appreciate that perspective. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Salomé, what are your thoughts? You come from a world in which protest looks very different.
I'm glad you said it and I didn't have to. I mean, honestly, I believe protesting is something that is an expression of the individual. I believe that each person, in the means of how they protest, is how they choose to express themselves, express the feelings that they are going through, and expressing their own beliefs. So I don't really think there's a wrong or right way to protest. I think that folks doing something to the way that they choose to do something is just that. I do, and I will say this, oftentimes I tell people, like, you know, the First Amendment does give you freedom of speech, but it does not protect you from these hands. And that being said, I don't want us to value property over people's lives. I don't want us to be in a place where people are held to an unrealistic standard of absorbing violence against them. I want people to feel that their protest is personal. Their way of protesting is their relationship to the cause. And as much as I think that, I don't want people to tell me how to protest or tell me what they think I'm doing is wrong in terms of how I express my frustrations, my anxiety, my angst towards the system that seems to just not want me to exist. And at the same time, I will defend others' way of doing it, as this is what their lived experience is. who are we to tell them that that's not? And I definitely, I would say, probably have more of a tolerance for the destruction of property and violence, given that that is a closer norm for me than some folks here. But I do say that one of the things that I wish to focus on with protesting is, what are you doing for the people who are within arm's reach? And, you know, we can say all day that Black Lives Matter, we can say all day that Black trans lives matter, but what are you doing for the people that fall into that category that are literally within your arm's reach? Have you talked to them? Have you asked them what they need? Have you asked them, what can I do to make sure that you feel like you have the right to exist? Is way more important than looking outward, looking further out of how do I help the people over there? Because if more people focus on the people within their arm's reach, we would see less death of those in our community. Because we would be checking in on each other, we'd be protecting each other, and understanding that there are demons inside our own house that we need to protect people in our family from.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We'll do a quick shout out to Caden and Stacy thank you for those donations. We appreciate that. You're helping keep us going. Travis, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say these protests are working, in my opinion, because they have overwhelming public support. And because of that public support, we now have the Oregon legislature looking at taking a whole host of actions related to criminal justice and police reform. At the national level, the House Democrats have come together and have actually taken up a bunch of proposals that the Black Caucus has had out there for years. Nancy Pelosi is now taking those and putting those into a package that the House Democrats will be voted on. And actually, shockingly, the Senate, which is controlled by Republicans, have put Senator Tim Scott, who is the lone African-American senator, in charge of doing criminal justice and police reform. And so it looks like something may actually happen that will change the system. You know, when I'm looking at protesting, when I'm looking at what can I do to really ensure that we move in a direction that will make the statement Black Lives Matter to be true, I look at what can I do to impact the system and change the system. Because again, this all boils down to systems that this country was founded on that were set up to either keep us enslaved or ensure that Black people fail in this country.
Very true. Thank you. All right, Lamar, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's been wild being on the ground for the protest in Portland. I will say I agree.
Can you speak up just a little bit for us?
Sorry, I keep on forgetting that my mic is far away. Yeah, I just said it's been wild being on the ground for the past couple weeks. I agree that I do think that there is momentum. Part of what we've been doing at the protests is education, right? It's not just it's a tool to voice where we're at and how we're feeling, but we've also purposefully been protesting in gentrified Portland, right? Because and when we go by all those like nice fancy houses, we chant out "March with us." We ask them to come join us. We pass around our materials with Ted Wheeler's email to make sure that they know what to do, right? And it's because of the protests so far that we've gotten resource school officers out of the Portland schools. That we've seen some movement on police being removed from TriMet. We've started the process. We have started the process of defunding and starting to cut Portland Police Bureau's budget, even though the budget right now is not where I think the community wants. It is very clear that what we're doing is working, and we will continue to build capacity and pressure until either we get what we want, until we are able to have folks in office that actually will listen to us and ensure that we are building a safer Portland and a safer Oregon in general. And so for me, this is what we have needed, and quite frankly, like, I think we need a lot more, right? And I think protest is also a way for folks who maybe they don't have the ability to vote to still participate, right? It's a way to show your activism and organizing, while also making like we are seeing tangible things come out of these. So that's what I'll say.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. Let's move over to Alexxis. What are your thoughts on this one here?
Thank you, Erin. I've heard it said that riots are the language of the unheard. And that's what's being happening right now, is that this is happening because it's the only way some people listen. You know, I tell people that my sons are in their 20s and half their lifetime was spent with a black president. Now think about that for a minute. I'm 47. If I spend half my lifetime with a black president, this world would be a whole lot better, I think. But at 20, they're thinking, oh, this was great. And then reality kicked in. That even for that 8-year time frame, the world had changed very little overall. So with this expectation that Obama would leave office, whoever would come in and race relations would get better, now we're going to have to fix 40 plus years of that now. That's what this is. That's what the protests are. That's what the riots is, going back and fixing 50 years of segregation, of civil rights that were getting better up until the last 3 years ago. Nothing significant, but now with this level and the fact that it's keeping going, it is about sustainability. It's about not letting it go. It's about, okay, we keep trying to get you to listen and you're not listening because it keeps happening. And so people are speaking very loudly right now. And that loudness is damaging property. That loudness is causing disruption. But it's listening is what's happening. Because otherwise, we can stand out in front of your city hall and talk all damn day and you're just walk and go to your car and go home. But if you can't get to your car because everybody's protesting right in front of that, then you're going to stop and you're going to listen. And you're going to know what's going on. And that's what's happening. If people can't get to their everyday lives, they have to start listening. You have to start disrupting it in order for it to pay attention. So I think it's necessary, and it's working.
Thank you, Alexxis. I mean, I have some feelings there. We had people who showed up to state capitals with weapons in hand, demonstrating they were willing to take lives for what they believed in, got to pushing and screaming at and messing with cops. They all went home. We demonstrate that we are only dangerous to frickin' store windows and some trash cans, and we got the fire hoses and the bullets, rubber bullets, and the pepper spray all over again. So demonstrating power looks different in these systems. All right, Cameron, can we hear from you as well?
Yeah, I was first going to say that, Erin, you're the moderator, but you are by no means moderate, and I love that. So I am now coming up upon a decade of grassroots direct action. I was 20 years old when my life first got changed by protests, and I got to be a part of the Occupy Wall Street movement, and that was a transformative experience for me. You know, before Occupy, I did not think my voice mattered. I saw myself as a young, poor, black, queer 20-something. Why would anybody give a damn what I had to say? And it was being down at Occupy and being surrounded by tens of thousands of people who all came from different backgrounds and people who looked like me, who understood my experience, and us all being there together. That was the moment that I finally understood that my voice mattered. And when I speak up, other people might listen, and that's creating space for us to come together and make change happen. And so I look at what's happening right now, and I'm calling this a paradigm shift. And one of the things that gives me so much hope, gives me so much inspiration, is seeing our beautiful young black leaders who are right now with Rose City Justice, with the Portland Civil Rights Collective, I have never seen such a diverse group of young Black people who are making immediate change happen in their community. And it's so crucial because these youth, they're not tainted by apathy or pessimism like we are. You know, even for us, Erin, you're a great example where you believe in radical change, but you have also said, well, these are the way things are. This is the status quo. There are some times when it's just better just to be quiet. Those youth do not have that filter yet. They are the perfect people to wake us up and remind us to take urgent action. We can't wait for incremental change any longer. We have said over and over again, well, we'll learn from this. You know, thoughts and prayers. We'll do better next time. We can't keep doing that. Lives are dying while we wait for us to do this gradual change that has failed us for so long. And so that's what I see as the most crucial moment. I'm a board member of Venture Portland, serving our small business districts here in Portland. I have a lot of empathy, and a lot of sympathy for our small businesses that are already going through a hard time with COVID, and dealing with writing is also a challenge. But we cannot let that distract from the fact that the change that we need to happen, you know, if we don't change, that's not because of smashed windows. If we don't change, that's because we failed to listen to the urgent need for change. One thing that's happened recently is a lot of people have had, accolades and positive fanfare for the fact that we now have a new police chief. I've been doing activism in Portland since 2011, and in that period of time, I have seen 6 police chiefs. We have not seen the changes that we need in this community. We have seen continued criminalization of houseless folks. We have seen people going through mental health crises, dying at even increased levels, even after we settled our lawsuit with the DOJ. And we're continuing to see Black communities, brown communities, and indigenous communities living in terror. So let's not look at incremental changes anymore. That's what I love about the raw, pure power of protest, because we are not just going for the scraps. We are acknowledging that the system is broken and that we have to actually reimagine what we can do in order to actually bring some tangible change in our community. We cannot keep setting up committees and oversight things and having 2-year studies thinking that that's going to make anything happen. It's used to placate us, to think that it's going to change, and then someone dies again, and then we get outraged, and then they try to say, oh, well, we fired the boss who was in charge. We created this new committee. We have to stop letting that happen. So that's why I love our youth organizers right now, because they see that and they know that they've got something bigger to win. And that's why I call for folks to continue to support our protesters and not just to side with them. These are folks who are not working because they're down there defending our rights. They need to be taken care of. We need to be setting up meal trains. We need to be helping to pay for rent. We need mutual aid. And so, we're happy to do the Black Resilience Fund. Lamar, thank you for being down there. I want to support you too. So let's all ensure that we take this moment and we get the most we can out of it.
Great, thank you. It's true, you're right. I mean, I work for a large white corporate system. I have definitely been the only Black voice and only trans voice on many occasions. And sometimes you learn how to hold your tongue, how to pick your battles. I truly believe that I love that the young folks are there. I feel like young folks and old folks need each other. Old folks are there to help you remember how to slow down, how to organize that legacy knowledge, while young folks are there to keep pushing us and to hold us accountable and keep that fire. And to help us remember that we should be incensed by how we are being treated right now, and we can still feel really strongly about that. As you get older, you learn that reform tolerance while we're trying to remain revolution-minded, and I think both sides of the coin are really necessary there. So on that note, as we talk about advisory committees, there was a question offered to me as the panel moderator from a representative in the city. They are curious about how we would feel about an LGBTQIA2S+ advisory committee. The way they envision it, it would be comprised of non-city folks that meet regularly to analyze policies through the lens of our communities, to make those recommendations to council, and generally serve as a sort of central body for any issues that affect the larger Portland LGBTQ+ community. So we know how Cameron feels about some of that. Let's talk. So Travis, let's go ahead and talk with you. We'll start with you there, because as a member of the DNC, how do they get this information? Like I've mentioned, I'm kind of tired of having to give out my pain, my trauma, my story over and over again to have it consumed. And for people to pick out literally one or two pieces and then decide that's all I'm going to address because systemic inertia and calcification means I cannot go any farther than that or any more quickly. So what are your thoughts on that? And it looks like this time we actually do have a little over 10 minutes left. So go ahead.
Well, when it comes down to an LGBTQ plus advisory committee, I guess my question is, what's the guaranteed impact that committee would have? Would it be one of those committees like Cameron was saying, where you're putting in all this work and you're doing all this, and then you give recommendations and nothing happens with the recommendations? I think at this point, for me personally, I wouldn't want to be on a committee like that unless I had some degree of certainty that the recommendations that the committee came up with would be implemented. And so, and going to the work that I do with the DPO and the DNC, I do a lot of different work. I'm actually working on 2 resolutions now that I'm hoping that the state party will adopt. And I'm working on 2 versions that I'm hoping the national party will adopt. One that demands justice for George Floyd, and another one that actually declares that Black Lives Matter. Because believe it or not, our Democratic Party here in Oregon has never passed a resolution actually saying Black Lives Matter. That actually, and that then goes on to actually call on the party to do some things and to take some actions. So, doing work that results in just busy work and doesn't result in anything, I'm really beyond that at this point, as both a party activist and a labor activist and a healthcare activist. I want to engage in work that I know will definitely have an impact and isn't going to just be a pile of recommendations that sits on somebody's desk.
Fair enough. Thank you. I appreciate that. Before I let you go, we did have a question. So as we go through and answer this question, since we're talking about how we support legislature, are there some POC-led organizations that you're throwing your support behind right now?
I really think it's more important to get behind legislators and your black leaders, or the leaders who have shown that they are willing to do the work to dismantle systems. So for instance, Mike Schmidt was somebody who I met with, who was elected to Multnomah County DA, and he ran on a reform platform, and he's got some really great ideas, and I supported him, and I encourage folks to check him out and hold him accountable now that he's been elected. Representative Janelle Bynum is a state representative, our only Black representative in the House, led on a bill called the Crown Act a couple of years ago that made it illegal to discriminate against Black hair in Oregon. Senator Lou Bynum, not Lou Bynum, excuse me, Senator Lou Frederick, who is a senator from Portland, African American. He's worked on many different bills over the years. He worked recently on Senate Bill 420, which made it much, much easier for cannabis-related convictions to be expunged from your record. I know him and Representative Janelle Bynum. They were working on a police accountability bill that would have made it harder for police officers who had been fired to get their jobs back by going through the union arbitration process. So I encourage folks to really support the representatives who are already out there, who are doing the hard work, because they need us. They're going up. Folks like Janelle Bynum is the only Black person, not just woman, in the entire House of Representatives. And so at times, I know she's not only going up against the Republicans, she's going up against some of the Democrats who don't see the priority and the importance in the work that she is doing. So get behind your legislators, and if you want help doing that, feel free to reach out to me. I'm Travis at dpo.org, and I do a lot through my Travis Nelson Facebook page as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that full answer. And so same thing, want some comments on how we feel about yet another advisory committee and any organizations that are POC-led that you're driving forward and recommend people getting behind. Lamar?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a number of organizations out there that I think we need to be supporting. I want to highlight PALF, which is the Portland African American Leadership Forum. They have done great work with Unite Oregon. They've done great work to actually put together the policy platforms of the protests that have been going on, and actually also have like a 13-page like research paper on what defunding actually means and what other parts of the budget that actually needs more assistance in terms of the Portland City Council budget. So they've been my North Star in terms of my policy advocacy with the protests. And in terms of an advisory board, when I hear the word advisory, the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh, well, we don't have any power, right? And so I want to make sure that anything that we build, that there is a systemic power that comes from whatever like governance board that we create. But we absolutely should be we absolutely should have representation from all the different types of communities that exist, including queer and trans, as well as Black, Indigenous, and folks of color. And so I think without that, good policy will never be made. And even beyond policy, we also know that straight up, this is a cultural issue. This is like a heart issue, right? Like, there's a lot of things that we need to do to just like have conversations with our like racist like uncle or grandma or like whatever that may be. But that's the real work. Yeah. I'll use my time.
Great. And then real quick, what is we'll go ahead and have you drop any social media handles that you want if you're open to having people follow you, and we can do another round of that. Lamar, do you have anything real quick?
Yeah. I have a Twitter and an Instagram. You can find me at Lamar_Wise. Yeah, I think that'll probably do.
All right. Same thing, Travis. Real quick, do you have a social media handle folks should be following? Okay, we'll come back to that. All right, Salomé, let's hear from you. That advisory committee question. And of course, then any organizations, POC-led orgs, people should be getting behind, and then how can people, follow you?
Oh, yeah. 3 questions at once. So I'll start with organizations. Definitely, if you haven't already, follow and give to the Black Resilience Fund. We don't have any overhead costs in the fund, and so that means every dollar that you donate is actually going into the hands of a person who identifies as Black in the Portland greater area. I would say also, Unite Oregon, PALF, the Urban League. There's just so many good different organizations out there that are doing work. And, when it comes to the advisory boards, whenever someone asks about an advisory board or creating a committee of some kind, I honestly think to myself, clearly you haven't been listening to people who have been talking. Because they're already there. They're already telling you what their needs are. And the question is why are you not listening to them? And why do you want to find a whole new host of people to listen to? And for me, it's honestly because of the fact that you don't agree or don't like what the people who are speaking up are saying. And so, sorry. Again, whole other frame of reference when it comes to...
No, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry.
Just a different frame of reference when it comes to doing this work. And I say this because, I have worked for many folks in the legislature. I have worked for them, with them. I've worked on some of their campaigns even. And even that at the city level, worked on several people's different campaigns throughout the years. And I think that it's a matter of if you are in a place where you are wanting to know how to help, it should be up to you to go find the people who are willing to speak from that community, who are willing to still educate, as opposed to having them come to you. And that's where we see a power shift dynamic happen, is when the people who have the privilege, who should be listening, stop talking and go out and research and find the people who are willing to give that education. Because it shouldn't be up to the folks who are trying to be liberated to have to open up their stories again, open up their trauma again, do this work and come to those who don't have that experience for them to be heard. And so, honestly, I'm not really for it. And the only way I think I could ever be for it is if we move away from the idea of some guarantees of something happening to the committee has the final say. And then I think that you'll find that you'll get the right type of people on that committee, on that type of board who know that their voice is not only going to be heard, but it's going to be implemented, and keep that promise. As far as people following me, I'm kind of a more behind the curtain type of person. So all of my social media handles are all in regards to my artwork. I make friends by befriending my friends' friends. I don't really branch out. So, I mean, you can follow me if you want. Most of my handles are art by Isoko. But just so you know, that's mostly for my art. And so you can check out my art if you'd like. You're muted.
Thank you. So we've got a couple minutes left. We'll do our last couple folks here. It looks like Joe Ayers won our raffle, so they will send out an email to check in with you on that. All right, go ahead, Cameron.
Thank you. So I guess I have to revisit what I said earlier because I don't want people to get too much of an impression on my feelings on advisory committees because I do have some nuance there. And specifically because this question was around the city of Portland. I used to work for the city, and my opinion on what we really should be doing that makes a lot of sense, would make a big impact, is supporting the Office of Equity and Human Rights. It's underfunded. It should be doing both internal work, but engaging with the community, and it needs to have an intersectional lens. Right now, there is emphasis on equity around race and around disability, but equity involves gender, involves sexuality, involves income, and more. And I would love to see that be an Office of Equity and Justice that is looking at all oppressed and marginalized communities. When it comes to advisory committees, my biggest frustration is when it's used as a response to protest. Like when I did my hunger strike back in 2012, and they said, well, let's have a forum. And no, I wanted justice for houseless people. I didn't want a forum. I wanted justice. And so that's my biggest concern. If you are starting a new initiative, or if you don't know where to start, I'm open to hearing your idea for a committee. My question is, where's the teeth and where's the money? Because our communities have constantly been denied financial opportunities. And are you about to exploit them for free labor for you to do the right thing? No. I think that the city and other government funders need to actually put dollars into civic capacity building. And I mean block grants to great organizations like those already mentioned so they can continue to build their civic power so they have at least equal footing to those who have had access all along. And so we've mentioned great organizations already. Brown Hope is where I work, so you can follow our work there to create real platforms for Black, Brown, Indigenous people to lead. Unite Oregon, a great organization. Rose City Justice is a new movement, but I want us to pay attention and support those young leaders. And I also want to give a huge shout out to East County because Black Portland has experienced the disease of gentrification, and we're out here everywhere. And Beyond Black CDC is a group working out in East Portland, empowering the Black community that's out there, providing economic opportunities and spaces for political action. So please find ways to support Beyond Black. And you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. They're all pretty much my name, Cameron Whitten. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. All right, Ms. Alexxis, go ahead and wrap us up. Let's hear from you.
All right, just real quick. Pretty much, I agree with what everybody said. But anytime you call for a committee or a liaison, like I said, it's a response to, ooh, we screwed up. Oh, so let's go talk to some people. No. Back up. Two things is going to say. One, you had this opportunity. You didn't do it before, so what's different? So please tell me, one, what you're going to tell me that's different. And two, it's a figurehead. If you're just wanting a name to put on your website to say that we have an LGBTQIA advisory council, which does what? Thirdly, money. If you are going to have LGBTQ folks who are probably underworked and have huge rates of unemployment. Give them the opportunity, but pay them. Don't ask me to come talk to you for free. Don't ask for me to redo my trauma, to go through all this just so you can feel better about how you deal with others like me in this world. No, if you're going to put me in that position and others like me, compensation needs to come. And I'm not talking gift cards. I'm talking people doing the work and being paid to do a job. And as far as following me, I don't even get it down with instant or any of that stuff because, man, people lose their minds. They don't know how to talk right. They get on there. And I'm not trying to fight with somebody online. I work for domestic violence survivors. That's what I do. We have an 81% staff of POC. That's what we do. We serve 80% POC staff. It's what we do. That's how, if you want to support the community in general. Support the people you live with. Support the people who live next door to you. That's the person you want to follow. Know who your neighbor might be. Even if you don't have any intentions, find out what their name is so at least you know who that is. We spent all this time hiding from each other because of a world that we're afraid of. If we know who people are, we're less afraid of that. That's what I got.
All right, fantastic. I want to thank absolutely everyone for your time, your energy, your engagement, your feelings, your thoughts. As always, we are constantly being asked to give. I appreciate everybody showing up today. My mom used to say there's only a couple things that we have to do, which is stay black and eventually meet our maker. So I'm going to encourage everybody on the call, stay black, stay up. To our white friends, allies, and folks who are here, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera did not start a riot in 1969 at Stonewall for all of our allies to sit anywhere silent during any of this. So come with it, come support us, and we'll be looking for you out there to be standing next to us, and we'll be looking for those dollars to be in our coffers so that we can help move forward too. All right, everybody, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming. I appreciate you paying attention to us for a little while. It's necessary. It's very important that we get an opportunity to speak and that people take that to heart and move it forward. Otherwise, have a great day, have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you in power.